Okay, good evening and welcome back. This lecture we'll be finishing off the projectile setups, so we'll have the rocket projectile done by the end of this lecture. So if we go back into the BP player, the player blueprint, and make our way to the rocket fire function, all we need to do, we need the same two inputs as before. So we want an integer for the number of shots, and we want a spawn location. And remember, this is of type scene component, and is a reference to the scene component. And then from here, this won't be a whole lot different to the power up fire. So what we want to do first of all is plus an integer to an integer, and this time it will just be 1 plus the integer that we're adding in, which will be the number of shots. We will then divide an integer by an integer. This will be a slightly smaller one this time, so this will be -1 to start it at a minus value again, but not quite as many. And then down here, we just want to create another local variable, and we will make this one offset. So again, the same as last time, but making this local means that the power-up fire won't be able to access it. And then we will set the offset based on the value we get from here. That will be the first pin the rocket fire calls. And then, as before, the offset will call a for loop. We don't need to pre-fill this, but just so we can see what's happening, I'll make the first index 0, just to highlight again that that's the ideal place to start that. And we'll make the last index the total number of shots we want to be fired. Just going to double click on this wire as well, and we'll just move that up there to tidy that a bit, and I'll do the same for this one down here. So that looks a bit better. And then down here, we will get world transform. We will then break the transform again, so we're going to do something fairly similar to the power up projectile again. In fact, I say fairly similar. What I'm going to do is go to the power up projectile. I'm going to drag select all of these. I will press Ctrl+C to copy that. I'll remove that one, and we'll just paste that in. And then we can just hook that to the transform. At this point, this will actually be exactly the same, and the offset will be the only thing which is different, but that will be controlled by the values we set up here. And in fact, if we go back over to the power up once more, if we just copy these nodes at the end after the spawn actor and including the spawn actor, paste that in, the for loop will call that again. The return value will be the spawn transform for where it starts, and again, the only thing we want to change now is we're actually going to add 4 to the offset each time this goes round. We want a bigger offset from the first point of the point of the first rocket to the point of the second rocket we'll be firing. And that is the rocket fire done. Just to confirm, in between, I've just quickly tidied up the blueprints here with some reroute nodes as well, the same way I did for the rocket fire function, so it just looks a bit nicer. But I've done that off screen to save us some time. And then we've already got something to spawn in here, so we can test this as working. The only other thing we want to do is go back to the event graph. We can drag the projectile spawn to give us a base spawn point. And then we also want to give this a value, so I'm going to give this a value of 1. I want it to fire 2 rockets because I'm going to do quite a lot of damage. I don't want to fire too many. And remember, because we're doing this in a for loop, which starts from a 0 array index, we will actually need the number 1 to fire 2 rockets. And then if we promote this to variable, I'm going to call this rocket shot count. At some point I seem to have added a new variable, which I don't need, so I'm going to delete that. Let's move this down here, that'll be fine. So there we go, we now have our rocket power up ready, and we'll need to do the same thing as before to test this. So we will go to the B has rockets boolean, we will tick that to say that we do have rockets. And with that done, we can go back. This should work as default as the others have. So we're just going to go in, and I'm getting too many up here. Yeah, I can hold that down and they'll spawn rockets indefinitely. So that seems worthy of debugging. So if we just go back to the BP player, so we're definitely firing them. We're doing the for loop for the correct number projectiles. Okay, so the base fire rate for the rocket hasn't been set. So if you've forgotten to do that, I've put the base fire, well, I meant to put the base fire rate for the rocket to 1, so every 1 second we can fire some rockets. And the primary fire rate, base fire rate is 0.2. I'll just check the others. Okay, so I've set the rocket fire rate to 1. So make sure that your anything which doesn't have the word base in it for the fire rates is set to 0, because otherwise there's going to be a delay on the initial shot, and that can feel a bit strange. So make sure that there's no delay for the initial shot, but then make sure that the base fire rate does have a value, because that's the value we will be resetting it to after you fire the first wave of projectiles to stop the player from spamming the button. So if we compile that and save again, if we go back in now, I should be able to hold X, and there we go, we can see 2 ships appearing. We can just about make out there's 2 of them. I was expecting 2 rockets. So as far as the spawning of the rockets is gone, that looks perfect. We can also see there's a slight rotational offset between them. So we can see 2 sets of each wings, which means that the offset's slightly different, which again is what I was expecting. So that seems to have worked perfectly fine. So that's our rockets done. Just remember to make sure that the base fire rates have a value and the fire rate doesn't. That just caused a small problem for myself. Besides that, that is the projectiles all set up and ready to fully implement when we've got some more blueprints to add into those. So I'll leave that here for this lecture, and I will see you in the next one.